What is the history of shortwave radio? Shortwave radio refers to the use of high-frequency radio waves in the range of 1.6 to 30 MHz for communication. The history of shortwave radio begins in the early 20th century, with the development of wireless communication technology. In the early 1920s, shortwave radio technology began to emerge as a viable means of communication. Shortwave radio signals could travel long distances, bouncing off the ionosphere, which allowed them to be received around the world. This made shortwave radio a popular means of communication for international broadcasting, diplomacy, and military purposes. One of the earliest uses of shortwave radio was for maritime communication. In 1927, the first international shortwave radio communication service was established between New York and London. This service provided reliable communication for ships at sea, enabling them to stay in touch with land-based stations and other ships. During World War II, shortwave radio became an important tool for military communication and intelligence gathering. Shortwave radio receivers were used by spies and resistance fighters to listen to enemy broadcasts, and by military commanders to communicate with troops in the field. After the war, shortwave radio continued to be used for international broadcasting and diplomatic communication. Many countries established their own shortwave radio stations to promote their culture and political views around the world. In the 1950s and 1960s, shortwave radio became a popular hobby for radio enthusiasts around the world. Amateur radio operators used shortwave frequencies to communicate with each other, often using Morse code, and to listen to broadcasts from around the world. Today, shortwave radio remains an important means of communication for international broadcasting, emergency communication, and military and diplomatic purposes. While other forms of communication, such as satellite and internet-based communication, have become more prevalent, shortwave radio continues to provide reliable communication in remote and underdeveloped areas where other forms of communication may not be available.